Hey, what are you doing? Driving to the park famous for its plum groves, I encountered a pregnant woman. Surprisingly, she was rummaging through the trash. Her clothes were filthy, looking as if she hadn't bathed for days. Yet, unmistakably, she appeared to be my son's wife. Isabella, what's happened to you? As soon as I spoke, she shook her head, indicating a case of mistaken identity, and attempted to flee. There was no mistaking her, so instinctively, I grabbed her arm, only to find she was very thin. Startled, I heard her stomach growl. Are you hungry? Would you like to eat this? I offered the sandwich I had, handing it to her. She swallowed her saliva, and in a barely audible voice, "Thank you," she said, before snatching the sandwich and quickly leaving the scene. I stood there dumbfounded. It had to be Isabella. The sight of a pregnant woman starving and so similar to my son's wife stirred my concern. I pulled out my mobile phone from my bag and called my son. "Kevin, I just met Isabella in the park about an hour away from your house." "What? What are you talking about? My wife just gave birth. I was about to contact you." My son joyfully shared that a boy, resembling him, was born just a short while ago, firmly denying the woman could be his wife. But wasn't the due date still a month away? Early births happen all the time. Even for a first pregnancy? Feeling unconvinced, I pressed on. "Hey, cut it out. Aren't you happy a grandson has been born?" "Of course I am. Sorry." "Stop talking nonsense. There are plenty of people who look alike." Though delighted about my grandson's birth, the earlier incident lingered in my mind, prompting me to share about giving away the sandwich. "What are you doing?" "Grandma got scammed by a sandwich thief. Don't go to that park again. Next time, you might get stripped of everything." How rude. What a thing to say. Even as I retorted, Kevin maintained a cheerful tone throughout our conversation. So was the birth of his wife true? And my believing the pregnant woman in the park was merely a mistake on my part? Feeling deceived, I fell silent. Maybe Dad's retirement, and you turning 63 means you're starting to lose it. That's ridiculous. All right, I'm going to see Isabella's child. Frustrated by his words, I ended the call and drove about an hour to the hospital, knowing the location thanks to my son. Arriving there, I found my son looking around at the hospital entrance. "Did you wait for me on purpose?" "Yeah, actually, the birth took a long time, and my wife's condition worsened." Thus, visiting was not possible at the moment. However, having come all this way, I couldn't leave without seeing my grandson. My son took me to the nursery, where I saw the baby through the glass. He's adorable. Well, he's my son after all. And how is Isabella doing? I guess she's all right. Though I didn't insist on meeting Isabella immediately postpartum, something about my son's response nagged at me. Back home, while preparing dinner, I couldn't help but dwell on the park encounter. Who did I meet after all? Since Isabella's only family is Dad, and she never mentioned having sisters, and having met my son and his wife numerous times over their 3-year marriage, mistaking Isabella was unlikely. They say everyone has 3 lookalikes in the world. It must have been someone else. Despite reassuring myself, another question emerged. Why would a pregnant woman be scavenging through the trash in the park? Disturbed, I woke up early the next morning, eager to meet the woman resembling Isabella again, and visited the park. However, I didn't encounter the pregnant woman again, despite several attempts. Over 10 days passed, and just as I was about to give up, thinking she might no longer be there, I stopped by a grocery store on my way home. There she was. The woman who bore a striking resemblance to Isabella was there. Just then, she was caught shoplifting a sandwich due to hunger, with a store clerk gripping her arm to prevent her escape. The clerk's voice was filled with anger, threatening to call the police as she stood there frightened and tearful. Seeing this, I stepped in front of her immediately. "Oh dear, were you mistaken for a shoplifter?" "Huh?" "I'm sorry, clerk." My wife forgot her wallet, so I came to pay. How much do we owe? As I took out my wallet at the register, the clerk scratching his head in embarrassment.
Behave in a way that doesn't raise suspicion,
he scolded sternly. On behalf of the woman, who could only apologize while crying, I kept apologizing until the clerk finally accepted it. Let's go. As we left the grocery store, she followed me obediently. Thank you. She thanked me in a voice so low I could barely hear it, yet her stomach grumbled again, perhaps still hungry. Don't cry anymore. Take this. In return, let's have a little chat. The woman hesitated for a moment, but nodded, seemingly unable to resist her hunger. Without saying anything else, I had her sit on a bench in the nearby park and eat the sandwich, which she devoured eagerly. She looked exactly like Isabella. Observing her, I noticed a familiar bruise on her neck, shaped somewhat like a nose. It was a birthmark I had seen when my son's wife stayed over. She had told me it was congenital. The same mark in the same place, and even the shape is identical? This can't be a coincidence. But if she ran away again, it would all be for naught. Trying not to alarm her, I kept my anxiousness in check. It looks like you're pregnant, and you are about to have the baby soon? While eating, she nodded, and when I asked why she was living this way, she slowly started to talk. Asking more probing questions, she revealed she had been living in the mountains at first, but had spent days reaching the park to live. As I listened with a constant smile, the woman gradually began to open up. That's tough. I can imagine. As I empathized with her, she began to share more about her dire situation, tears welling up in her eyes. How fortunate I am to have found this person. The more I heard, the more I sympathized with her plight, and a horrifying truth unfolded. I can't leave you like this. Come to my house. However, the woman, now frightened by her own admission, covered her mouth and trembled. I'll make sure you and your baby are safe. Don't worry. When I looked into her eyes and held her hand, she finally agreed, reassured by my promise. Bringing her home, my husband was shocked, but understood after. We need to help her in any way we can, I explained. Then he made a phone call to a certain place, obtaining unbelievable information. Days later, thinking my son's wife, who had just given birth, would be discharged with the baby, I dialed my son's number. I'm bringing a present for the baby to Kevin's house.
Oh, she's gone back to her parents' home now.
Why? Isabella doesn't have a home to return to, does she? Suddenly, my son became flustered and spoke rapidly.
What are you talking about, Mom? Don't start getting senile on me, please.
Perhaps I was mistaken. I opened the front door while on the phone. Seeing me standing at his doorstep, my son was momentarily stunned. I had called him from in front of his house.
Mom, why?
I told you I was coming. It's careless to leave your front door unlocked. I'll come in. Entering, I found my son and a strange woman. And who is this?
Don't just barge in. There's a lot going on here.
Why is she holding the baby? Bombarding him with questions, my son scratched his head in discomfort. Then, looking determined, he faced me.
I was going to explain later, but this is Harper, my new wife.
What? What about Isabella? Isn't she about to give birth? My son equivocated.
She went back to her parents' home.
Before replying, her dad passed away, so she shouldn't have a family home anymore.
Oh, is that so?
I approached Kevin with a stern look. To think you'd kicked out your pregnant wife right after her dad died. I'm ashamed to call you my son.
Mom, are you dreaming or something?
Stop beating around the bush. I know you left Isabella in the mountains. In fact, the pregnant woman at the park was indeed my son's wife, Isabella. She had confided everything about her situation after we left the grocery store that day. By the way, she's being taken care of at our house. My son clicked his tongue.
So it's out, huh?
And started making excuses.
Isabella cheated first. The kid in her belly is someone else's.
He stubbornly claimed. so he kicked out Isabella and started a new path with Harper, the woman here. Let's do a DNA test to see who's telling the truth. I took out a swab sent by a private testing service. My son, panicking, refused while shaking his head. So I picked up a hair that had fallen on Kevin's shoulder. Just in case, I'll take Kevin's toothbrush too.
Stop it. Don't just do things your way.
Be quiet. If it turns out you're the father of Isabella's child, I'll file a police report. Be prepared. My son seemed unaware that leaving a pregnant woman in the dead of winter in the mountains was a crime. Despite committing such a terrible act, Kevin pleaded for a lenient resolution. What to do with you is something the person herself should decide. I went to the door, opened it, and invited Isabella and my husband, who were waiting in the car, into the house. The heavy footsteps of my husband and the anxious face of Isabella entered. Kevin never expected them to come with me. As Isabella stepped closer, Kevin began to sweat profusely and slowly backed away.
Isabella, I'm glad you're safe.
Don't joke. I'll never forgive you for falsely accusing me and putting the baby in danger.
But you're safe now, so it's fine, right?
That's absurd. Do you understand how I felt, walking for days from the foot of the mountain to the park, just to keep my child safe? Isabella was lured by Kevin for a drive about a month ago, only to be left behind while admiring the view. She managed to reach the park, but was too scared to return home, fearing Kevin would do something to her. Thus, she started living in the park, which had access to water and toilets. Moreover, Isabella's dad had passed away 2 months prior, leaving her without a family home to return to. The mere thought of how lonely she must have felt tightened my chest. Furthermore, Kevin had convinced her we were furious, thinking she had cheated and gotten pregnant by another man. She said, "I don't know what they might do to me if they find me." That's why she tried to run away instead of seeking help when she met me. Explain why you did such a terrible thing.
If I talk, will you keep the police out of it?
Maybe. Now spill it. Cornered by my shouting and my husband's glare, Kevin, realizing he couldn't escape, began to speak.
I got close to Harper, my new wife, at a high school reunion 7 months ago. Then she got pregnant. It's fate, I guess.
That doesn't justify abandoning Isabella.
Harper is the same age as me, but Isabella is 3 years older. Plus, Harper's dad owns a company, so I might take over someday.
He continued with his selfish reasoning, including that Isabella's baby was probably a girl, while Harper's baby was a boy who could inherit the company.
By the way, I've already divorced Isabella and married Harper, so it's too late.
I don't remember signing any divorce papers.
I forged your signature,
my son boldly admitted. That's forgery of official documents, you know.
Really?
Despite being my own child, I couldn't just let a fool go unchecked. You've just piled one sin on top of another. You're truly the lowest.
I told you everything, so don't make it a police matter.
I'm cutting ties with a good-for-nothing like you. Don't ever contact us again. Even as I said this, my son, unfazed and with a calm demeanor,
"Suit yourself,"
replied. He seemed completely oblivious to his own father glaring at him, ominously from behind Isabella. To Kevin, money and status must be everything now. We were utterly disgusted by Kevin's lack of remorse, but I decided to share some crucial information with him anyway. Did you know Harper's dad's company is about to go under? It was a client of the company your dad worked for before he retired. I got the information from an old colleague.
No, wait a minute.
Good luck turning around a company that's drowning in debt. As my son denied the possibility.
I heard it from a reliable source. There's no mistake,
my husband replied. Kevin then repeatedly asked Harper.
That's not true, right? It can't be, right?
However, she kept her head down and didn't respond, her silence speaking volumes. At least give me back the savings you accused me of stealing and the life insurance policy for Dad.
The savings were joint property, right?
The $38,000 was mine, saved up from before we were married. It's not joint property. My son sighed heavily.
I've already spent the savings.
And murmured. Isabella insisted. I'll get it back, no matter what, and confronted Kevin with this unexpected fact. And you can't claim Isabella's dad's life insurance money, Kevin. You're not a legal heir. This added insult to injury, causing Kevin to tremble. He then directed his frustration towards Harper.
You really had me fooled. My dream of becoming a CEO is shattered. What are you going to do about it?
Harper coldly replied to an angry Kevin. It's your fault for being deceived. As they started a nasty argument. I was looking for a man who could support me at the reunion because Dad's company was in trouble, Harper revealed. She thought everything was going according to plan when she got pregnant with Kevin's child. Both Kevin and Harper had their own dark sides, perhaps making them a match made in some twisted way. Fed up with their squabbling, I clapped my hands loudly to interrupt. Enough! Hey, Harper, was it a premature birth?
No, it was born on the due date.
I wasn't asking you. It's generally about 10 months for a pregnancy, not as soon as this, right? My son said.
Huh?
Kevin, puzzled, took out his phone to check the facts. After looking shocked, he glared at Harper.
Did you lie? Who's the dad of this child?
Harper bit her lip and remained silent. It seemed a DNA test is needed for Kevin and Harper. I handed my son the swab from the testing service. As Kevin approached the baby with the swab, Harper quickly moved the child away. Kevin looked devastated.
It's a lie, right?
It's obvious, even without a test. Kevin and Harper, you both owe Isabella $20,000 each for the false accusations. My son was shocked by my words.
Why?
Obviously, and we'll add compensation for the distress caused to Isabella. Plus, you'll pay $600 a month for child support until the child is 20.
Wait a minute, I'll be buried in debt.
Hearing the specific amounts made my son break out in a sweat. You're just facing the consequences of your actions. Oh, and you'll be dealing with the police, too.
Wait, you said if I talked, you wouldn't report me.
I've decided to report you after all. Too bad. Apparently dreading being arrested, Kevin knelt down on the spot and apologized to me.
Mom, please forgive me.
Aren't you apologizing to the wrong person?
Isabella, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me.
My son quickly turned around and rubbed his head on the floor, but such frivolous words wouldn't convince Isabella. And behind Isabella, my husband, with a face like a demon, was glaring at Kevin all this time. Then my son started to make an unexpected remark.
Dad must have had his fair share of affairs, right? Being a man and all.
My husband leaned in close to Kevin, frowning.
I haven't. Don't lump me in with scum like you.
And said in a low voice. Realizing he had no one on his side, my son slumped down powerlessly.
Please, save me.
Endangering pregnant Isabella and your unborn child is a grave sin.
I'll change, I promise.
I won't listen. Oh, I see red lights approaching. Dad, thanks for calling at just the right time. Thinking I hadn't called the police yet, my son's eyes widened in shock. Harper tried to sneak away at that moment, but my husband quickly caught her. You won't escape on your own. You'll have time to reflect behind high walls as well. Realizing resistance was futile, we handed Kevin and Harper over to the police. After being interrogated, my son and Harper faced severe charges for conspiring to endanger Isabella and her baby. Additionally, my son was charged with forgery for faking the divorce papers. We hired a solicitor to sell the house owned by my son and his wife. We made my son promise to pay $30,000 for adultery and emotional distress, plus Isabella's $38,000 savings, and $600 monthly for child support. The same amount was demanded from Harper for her role in the adultery and emotional distress. Harper's dad's company quickly went bankrupt, so my son and Harper will have to pay back whatever jobs they find once they're out. Oh, and it turned out Harper's child was fathered by another classmate who will now raise the child. It's a relief the child won't suffer because of this. Isabella later gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. After discussing it with my husband, we decided to adopt Isabella and have her live with us. Our home, filled with the sounds of a healthy baby, enjoys happy days as we busily care for our expanded family.